I want to know if there's any volunteer that would take a bite out of this.
Carrot, isn't it?
Either one of these.
Can I see the top of it?
I don't eat weeds.
That looks like carrot. It does look like a carrot.
It is
Or
not a
parsnip.
carrot.
It looks like a parsnip.
It is part of the same family, I think. Okay. Well, I'm glad you didn't volunteer. These are actually supposed to be edible, but I haven't tested them yet, so like I was telling Clark, my brother tests them first. Clark said he'd eat it a half hour after I did, and I usually won't eat it until my brother's tried it, so. They're supposed to be edible.
Do you know what they are?
This is Indian breadroot, Pediomelum mega something or another.
Huh.
And this one is a biscuit root, and I'm not sure which one yet. I've been working on identifying it. So anybody try these?
I would. They look like onions.
Yeah, they are onions. But what are you supposed to be careful about with onions?
Oh, I don't know how to be careful.
Oh yes, there's one called death camas, and if you see the flower, you will have absolutely no trouble telling it apart. But if the flower's gone, they're difficult to identify. My brother works at a hospital down in Kenham, and he tells about a story about a lady that touched one on her lip and her tongue, and then decided not to eat it, but it was a death camas. She suffered permanent damage to her liver and kidney just from that touch. Was in the hospital for a long time because of that. I've read about people eating death camas and surviving. There's somebody famous like William Ashley or somebody like that ate it and survived. But what I've read is that the poison varies from area to area and plant to plant, so but you don't want to eat it. So we're going to talk about wilderness survival.
Do they have the same root bowl?
I have
Or
not
just
dug
above?
up death camas to see. This one is Indian rice grass. It's a little green, and I will eat this one because I've eaten it a lot. My brother tested it and it was okay, so he lived, so we were good. This one is a lot tastier
You can pass that around.
if you wait till it's
Right,
hard.
There we go.
And
Like I learned at Scouts, yeah.
there's a lot of this out in the desert around here, and it is when it's hard, it's black, and if you bite on some of the seeds, it's kind of nutty. It's tasty. I feel sorry for the Indians though, who had to gather these things. It seems to me like it would take you hours and hours and hours to get enough to actually get a meal out of and get some nutrition from. But the reason I brought all this up was to give you guys, and I'm glad you guys wouldn't eat that stuff, because here's the real problem of wilderness survival. None of us, except for one or two people around the world, Larry Dean Olson is one of them, he's written lots of books about this stuff, but none of us know enough if we got lost out there to be able to say, oh yeah, I'll take some of this and take some of this and survive for very long. So, lacking that knowledge, what's the real key to wilderness survival?
Not getting in a position where you have to.
That's right. That is the key. So, when you go out, you have to make sure you know where you're going. Take a map. Take a compass. What else would you take with you?
Water.
Water.
Food.
Food is good, yeah.
Some way to make fire.
Some way to make fire. A couple of other things I
A
think I
way to
would take.
contact people, like whether it's a whistle
Okay.
or, a cell phone if you have reception.
I told Clark when we were talking about this, lots of batteries for my cell phone would be what I'd want to take. Although the scouting manual does point out that where Boy Scouts go, there is often not cell service. And so that's not always an option, but you certainly want to be prepared for that. And you can often hike up on the top of a mountain and get a call out.
I don't know, I'm originally from Salt Lake, and I don't know if Utah National Park says this, but Great Salt Lake Council had the satellite phones or whatever that you could actually check out. They were quite expensive phones, but a unit could check them out if they were going out in a remote area.
I'm not aware of that, are
So I
you?
don't know
Mark?
if our
Not that I
council
know of.
has
So
it
we
or
don't
not.
know if this council has it.
Okay.
But that's something we can check out.
Yeah.
Yes,
There are, there's a cheaper option than a satellite phone. The only brand I can think of is Spot.
oh, yes.
Basically what it is it allows you to send some pre-programmed messages
Mhm.
via satellite when you get to a certain place. You can send SOS if you need to.
And it sends your GPS coordinate, I think,
cool.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
And that-
That is what Randy Merrill used to notify that they'd had the tragedy down in Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And it's called Spot?
Spot,
Spot,
yeah.
yeah. Yes, I've heard of that. I have a friend whose brother uses that. He travels the world and hikes. And he sends messages at a certain time, twice a day,
Yeah.
to let people know he's okay.
I think Syscom will actually rent the spots to you for a week or whatever.
Okay, so there might be an answer. So here's what I carry in my backpack. My backpack's right there. I also
Did they say
have,
first aid kit?
I don't have a first aid kit in it, and I should, but that, as I went over the scout stuff and looked at their list, that's one of the things I don't carry with me. But my matches, I have a knife, my compass, I have a headlamp, and with extra batteries, 2 sets of batteries for my headlamp, because I don't like to run out of batteries. I also carry my GPS, and I always have water with me. I had the misfortune of being up hiking with my brothers and getting dehydrated, and was not a good situation. And I learned I carry 3 liters of water with me wherever I go now. But those are in the toilet paper. I always carry toilet paper and wet wipes with me. But I always try to take that with me wherever I go, so I have some things. You should have a map of the area. You should study that map. I remember as a boy when we used to go backpacking in IUNs, we would start planning our route out in January because we were so excited to go, and we tried to hike to Kings Peak every direction you could go, but we planned that route out and we knew that route, and when we got up there, we generally didn't get lost. But anyway, where are we for time? Okay. So, those kinds of things. I'm headed down with my brother this weekend to go canyoneering, and we're taking water because he got dehydrated on a trip. Also, I need to
Taking
make
water,
sure,
water filter.
water filter. And on this same trip that we're going on, he got dehydrated. And so we're gonna make sure that we can get water down in the bottom where there is water, so when we come back up. So being prepared, that's really what it's all about. Know where you're going and let people know where you're going, and take plenty of batteries for your cell phone in case you do have a chance to call. But because inevitably what happens is there are things that go wrong. And I want to read you a story, and I want you to listen to this story. I want you to think about things they may have done right, things they may have done wrong. This is a story my brother tells of being a scoutmaster. Does anybody know where Vasey Paradise is on the Grand Canyon? It's, I think, about 20 miles down, maybe not quite that far down from the dam. It's a beautiful place. And anyway, so he went down there with some scouts, and this is what happened. A few years ago, it was I think we figured out it was in 2001, so quite a few years ago. We camped overnight and then hiked down. A few years ago, we camped overnight, then hiked down to spend the day fishing, playing, and cooling our heels at Vasey's Paradise at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Early Saturday morning, we started down the trail, and I use the term loosely. It starts as a gentle slope for a couple of 100 yards. Then it turns into a series of small cliffs to scramble down. The height was too much for Dakota. We finally took him back to the vehicles and left him with food, water, and a radio. Since that day, whenever Dakota and radios are involved, I tease Dakota, is not allowed to use the radio because he talked incessantly to us all day long. At the bottom of the cliffs, the steepness doesn't improve much. It turns to a long boulder field, broken occasionally by stretches of loose, gravelly slides. The way is marked only by small cairns, 3 or 4 stones stacked up, and it seems that a few people disagreed on which was the best way, creating some route confusion. When we've finally reached a more level area, about 2/3 of the way between the top and the dry tributary canyon below, we rested, stashed water, and snacked a little. After our rest, we continued to the bottom. At this point, the word trail is more appropriate. It follows along the bottom of South Canyon, occasionally goes up one side or down the other to avoid drop-offs. The trail isn't too bad, but the heat was obviously affecting some of the scouts. Finally, there was one last steep drop to the Colorado River. In total, the hike is only 2.2 miles. Basie's is really a beautiful paradise. The cold river, green trees, spring flowing out of a cliff and cascading into the Colorado. There were some beautiful schools of fish in some of the eddies that continually mocked our attempt to lure them. And although it was cool along the river, there still was that dry, scorching, steep, rugged 2.2 miles between us and our vehicles. I've been down there, and it's straight up, and your vehicles are maybe half a mile away from you, actually on the horizontal. But way up there. It's, I think it's about 3,000 feet of elevation change. Not as much as it is down at Thunder River, but quite a bit. So we were worried about getting out in a timely manner. We inventoried what we had, water stashed along the way, plenty of water to start back with. We had enough leaders to have some leave early to ensure someone could make it back to inform the families where we were. Now, what we didn't have. No tents, no sleeping bags, no sleeping pads, no warm clothes. We were all in shorts and t-shirts. The only food was a few snacks. Three adults, 2 of the older boys and 2 of the scouts took off early. The other leader, 5 scouts, and I waited until the sun was at least a little lower. The first of the things we prepared for was food. I finally snagged a trout and a boat passenger of somebody that was floating the river, who obviously had more talent at fishing than the rest of us, gave Bob a nice fat trout. We cooked these and shared between us 7. Then we tanked up with water, soaked our clothing, and started up. The trail was hard on some of the boys, as we feared. The heat was unrelenting. When we finally reached the water stash, it was obvious that the heat would continue on into the night. The trail was too rough, impossible really, to hike in the dark because they're going back up that series of cliffs. And a few of the boys were in no shape to go on. I'm not sure how I would have done. When we finally made the firm decision and radioed to the others at the trucks, they went home to notify parents and prepared to come back in the morning to pick us up. The sun was low but still shining hot on the steep rocks above us. We started gathering dead wood in preparation of the cold night in the desert we expected. We could only find little teeny sticks. The area where we had stashed the water was the only place on a slope there was any vegetation, and it was almost nothing. After gathering the deadwood in a fairly large area, what we had wouldn't have been enough to loosely fill a laundry basket, and most of it was only about a finger thick. Hardly enough to last more than an hour or so. Then Trent found a log, and a good-sized one. It lay by itself in the sand flat with a few flat rocks around it. We couldn't move it, so we decided to stay right there. We shared each other's snacks, reserving a little for in the morning, laid on the rocks with no fire until about midnight. The temperature dropped to the point we were shivering in our shorts and t-shirts, so we lit the log. It's really hard to light one log on fire and keep it burning. But it worked, and we felt pretty blessed. It burned all night, leaving no charcoal and just a fine white ash. The next morning, it still took 3 hours to cover the 6/10 of a mile to the top. The other leaders were there with food and sodas. The boys were so tired, they only drank the sodas. So, what did they do right? What did they do wrong?
Sounds like they didn't study the map and the terrain before they went. I don't know. I don't know how much they knew, because they should have known that they either couldn't make it up and back in one day, or they left too late to make it back. I don't know. You're supposed to know whether you can get back out on that
So some
time.
of their planning wasn't the best. Okay, they did, I know that Bob that he mentions in there had been down there before, so I know at least he knew what it was like.
I think it's actually a positive thing that they decided to stop, because if they had continued on, I think that there would have been a much greater chance of injury. And I'm being willing to admit, we need to hunker down for the night was
Yeah.
probably a great decision. They gave themselves time to find firewood, as little as there was, and
Okay,
yeah.
what else?
They had the radios. Those sound like they were the savior.
They did,
Because
yeah. Mhm.
Otherwise, the people at the top would have been concerned. They would have felt like they had to come back down. It would cause all kinds
Or
of
waited
problems.
there all night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have caused all kinds of problems.
Okay,
So that was really
Who's
nice.
Dakota and how old is he?
the one that stayed up at the top,
Mhm.
he was one of the scouts.
Yeah, see, I'm
All by
not sure they
himself.
should
He
do
shouldn't
that.
have-
South,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
shouldn't
Yeah, that
have
was
left
the
him
first
by
thing I was
himself.
like, what were they thinking? Although he had a
He
radio.
did have a radio, yeah, but they did leave him by himself, yeah. Okay, which can be an issue, yeah, okay.
So my question is, why did one group go earlier? Because it seems like if they all would have left at the same time, they could have
Helped each
all
other.
made it,
other.
like,
And I
helped
asked my
everybody.
brother about that because I was curious about the same thing. And he said, in his mind, in Bob's mind, these other boys just were not gonna make it out that night. And they were just already kind of mentally planning to stay somewhere because of the trouble that they'd had going down. And they were concerned about bringing them back out in the heat of the day, because it was really, really hot. Don't know how hot, but it can get well above 100 down there.
Were there too many to have them all stay though? And just stay the night?
They wanted somebody to go up and see if they could
To let the parents know.
let parents know. And so they sent, I think it was
3
2
leaders.
leaders, maybe 3 leaders, 2 older boys.
But it sounds like
and
they
a
kept,
couple of the younger
they kept a
ones.
couple leaders in each,
In each
they
group, yeah.
didn't try to send one adult with a whole
Right,
bunch of
so
boys.
that's
they-
one of the things that they had lots of leaders there, and that was a
Mhm.
good thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So anything else you can think of?
Could they have conditioned the boys earlier?
Probably should have done some of that kind of preparation yeah, that's,
I think their water, good planning on the water.
But no food
but no food,
Poor planning
right?
on the food.
Because they were thinking, well, we're gonna go down and come back up and,
and clothing for hot weather. I
Snacks,
mean,
right.
if you're hiking in a hot canyon, Grand Canyon, you should have
yeah.
hats, things to cover your neck, long sleeve shirts. I mean,
This is something I always carry with me too, and
yeah, they weren't prepared for hot weather hiking.
So,
No
so they
shorts and a
didn't
t-shirt
plan
sounds
as
good.
well for contingencies, right? That's what they didn't do, is they didn't think about what happens if something happens, what do we do if?
Well, and where they didn't,
Yeah,
now I haven't been to the Grand Canyon, but I know some of the canyons, like out in Salt Lake and stuff, different times of year, you can get, what is it, that monsoon effect or whatever, where it can be hot and sunny, and then you can, and so it didn't sound like they planned.
well, they didn't
Pretty
plan to,
close.
they had up at the top, it stayed overnight, they knew it got cold at night, and they had tents and sleeping bags and everything up there, but,
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
that stuff was up there.
yeah, they didn't plan for a contingency, yeah. I always, when I go backpacking, I carry an extra day's worth of food. My son teases the heck out of me, but I always do it. Never had to use it, thank heavens, but he likes to tease me a lot because likes to go as light as possible. But I think our time's about to run out. It is out. So let me go. I want to go over the 7 things that that scouting says, and they did some of this. So when something happens, stop, and you can use the stop to think. Stop, think, observe, and plan before you do anything. And by the way, all of this is found inside here, program book number 2 on wilderness survival. Provide first aid to life-threatening injuries. These are also in the order of what you should do them in or think about them in. Seek shelter. Without using more energy than necessary, find, create shelter that will help your body maintain its ideal temperature. Their problem was staying cold until night came. Build a fire. In chilly, cold weather, fire can be important for maintaining body warmth, melting snow, drying clothes, signaling help, and raising your spirits. And I think that raising your spirits is something you really should think about because it does make a difference. Signal for help. So they sent somebody up. They had the radios. They talked back down. Drink water. You can survive for days without food, but in hot weather without water, only hours. Dehydration happens in cold weather too, even though you may not feel so thirsty. And I remember having my scouts down at Moab one time. We were doing a bicycle trip, and while we were biking, there was another gal with her family who died because she was dehydrated on a trail. She was probably a quarter of a mile from the road, but they didn't make it because of that. And you just can't be thinking about all that stuff and planning ahead for that particular thing. And then it said, don't worry about food. Yes, you might get hungry, but that's better than eating plants that cause intestinal stress or poisoning or burning more energy capturing an animal to eat than the animal will give you. So don't worry about this stuff. It doesn't matter. I could probably go for a long time as long as I had water. So those 7 priorities to think about all the time. We're moving into the time when we're going to be, lots of camps are going to be going on. Boys are going to be out doing a lot of stuff. You're going to have the boys out there doing all kinds of things. Talk to them about this kind of stuff. The contingencies, the priorities, staying put, being prepared so you don't get lost.